Hello everyone, welcome to The Right Theater, and today we're going to be talking about AC/DC, one of the most legendary rock bands in the history of the genre, so let's just get right into it. In 1963, the Young family moved from Scotland to Sydney, Australia. Angus and Malcolm took guitar lessons after school. The boys were considered to be mischievous but still good kids. I'm not sure if the guitar lessons were actually sponsored by the school, but they took them. And actually, Angus started playing on banjo, which is crazy that one of those legendary guitarists started playing on banjo, but you know what? Good for him. Malcolm and Angus would actually form AC/DC in 1973, but wouldn't release their first album, High Voltage, until 1975 with the vocalist Bon Scott. AC/DC would sign with Atlantic Records in 76, and in the same year they would release Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, their second album. I'm not going to do a second take on that because I want to make it very clear that is one of the hardest album names of all time to say, but it's a really good album. I think their first two are two of their best, in my opinion. The next year, they would release a new album and would tour Europe with Black Sabbath, where Bon and Ozzy became friends, while Geezer pulled a knife on Malcolm, and it wasn't like an actual knife. It would actually have one. It wasn't an actual knife. It was a switchblade knife, but it was actually just a comb, which, I mean, that's pretty funny, but you know. Good job, Geezer Butler. In 1978, they would release two entire full-length albums. 1 year later, they would release Highway to Hell, and it is one of the most popular AC/DC albums of all time, if not the most popular. It's actually many people's favorite AC/DC album, including Eddie Van Halen, who said that this was his favorite album from the band, which I'll respect that dude's opinion. If there's anyone's opinion you're going to take about rock, it better be him. Sadly, in 1980, Bon Scott would pass away from alcohol poisoning. And this would just completely rattle the band to the point where they would actually consider breaking up. But Bon Scott's parents would actually convince them to keep going because they said that that's what he would have wanted. Brian Johnson would come on as vocalist, and he would absolutely blow Angus and Malcolm and the rest of the band away with how good his vocal performances was. Actually, Bon Scott said that he respected Brian Johnson as a vocalist long before he actually joined the band. So I think that's really cool. And after that, with all of this and their main frontman dying, they would actually come out and release Back in Black, which is their most popular album of all time and one of the best-selling albums in music history. 1 year later, they would release another hit album, For Those About to Rock, We Salute You, which is also an incredible album. After this, however, the band would begin to decline slightly, and it would actually begin to slowly progress to the point where they would release the album Fly on a Wall, which was just absolutely bashed critically. And one of my favorite quotes from this is from the Rolling Stone. You never guess how sexist and politically incorrect all of this is if you didn't read the lyric sheet, because you can't make out a single word coming out of the dentistro glottis of Brian Johnson, except maybe the song titles, which tend to be repeated like mantras. Yeah, there's a lot more of that off that review of just absolutely tearing this album to shreds, and it was not the only one. This album just absolutely commercially and critically tanked, and it was one of the first signs that AC/DC was beginning to decline. However, 5 years later, they would release Razor's Edge, which is my personal favorite AC/DC album, and the success of this album would revive the popularity of the band and would be used in Applebee's commercials for years to come. In 1973, they would have the opportunity to record the single Big Gun for the movie The Last Action Hero with Arnold Schwarzenegger. I've never seen it. Have you guys seen this movie? I never have. I might have to watch it now, though. There was also an AC/DC video game in the works. However, it never really came to anything. I'm not even sure if it was ever in development. I think it was just proposed, but it was called AC/DC Defenders of Metal. But it would never really go anywhere, but I think that'd be cool because it was supposed to be like an arcade, beat 'em ups type game, so I love those kinds of games, so that would have been really cool, but no. But however, they would get an actual video game appearance in the 2008 game Rock Band 2. I'm more of a Guitar Hero guy, but Rock Band's also great, and that was an absolutely big moment because those were games I played as a kid, and that was kind of one of my introductions to rock, and more specifically AC/DC here. We're actually able to get onto SNL, which is just a really weird thing because I just can't imagine AC/DC on SNL, but they did it, and that's great for them. And then they would actually, this is pretty big, AC/DC would do the soundtrack for Iron Man 2 in 2010, which I think is absolutely an underrated Marvel movie. I don't really like the Marvel movies that much anymore, but that one I remember being really good. And obviously, if AC/DC is doing the soundtrack, it's going to be pretty dang good. However, sadly, Malcolm would be diagnosed with lung cancer and would pass away 7 years later in 2017. The band would never really be the same after this, sadly, and they would only release one more album in 2020, which is called Power Up. And personally, I did not enjoy this album very much. Just it kind of felt a little soulless, and that kind of feels mean saying it. But the critics seemed to enjoy it, and it was a pretty commercial success, being the sixth best-selling album of 2020. And I don't know, under the circumstances of 2020, I don't know how big of an accomplishment that really is, but it sounds cool. And the album would actually be dedicated to Malcolm Young because he passed away only 3 years before. And it would be in a similar way that Back in Black was dedicated to Bon Scott. And I think that's really cool about, even if this wasn't my personal favorite album, the fact that they were able to carry on his legacy. And I don't know, the whole legacy era I think is one of my favorites, just because the real impact with AC/DC as a band, it feels very felt and very, very real. Even if they did have their moments of, a little bit less appealing music, they kind of always would rebound. And I'm really interested to see, what's next for AC/DC, one of the most legendary rock bands in history. Is it all Applebee's commercials from here on out, or are they actually going to release new music and maybe do something really big and inventive? I don't know. I really like this band. Actually, for a while, I was a pretty big hater of AC/DC. I was like, oh, all the songs sound the same, but they're very fun, energetic, hype songs, and I've always enjoyed them. If you guys want to see more videos like this, if you have any other suggestions of bands that you think I should do, I'm planning on already doing this on Black Sabbath, Pink Floyd, and those kinds of bands. So if you want to tell me, if it's not a rock band, if you want me to do one on like Kendrick Lamar or Kanye West, I would be 100% down to do one of those. This is a very different video from anything else I've ever done before, so I absolutely hope that you guys have enjoyed this, and I will see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.